That night, Livia was not supposed to be there. It was almost 2 in the morning when the internal phone buzzed on top of a desk covered in dusty documents. The voice on the other end was calm, almost mechanical. "Mr. Valente wants to see you now." She took a deep breath. In 3 years with the company, no employee at her level had ever been called to that man's office. Some weren't even sure he actually existed. Livia grabbed her badge, straightened her blouse, and walked down the empty hallway. Each step echoed differently in that silence, and without understanding why, she felt that this night was about to change everything. Livia grew up learning that complaining was a luxury for those who had a choice. The oldest daughter of a family living on the edge, she took on responsibilities far too early. Her mother, Maria, had been diagnosed with a chronic illness when Livia was just 19. Her father disappeared shortly after. No explanation, no goodbye. Her younger brother, still a teenager, gradually shut himself off from the world. It was left to Livia to pay the bills, renew the medical prescriptions, and pretend she was doing fine. The job at Valente Investments was not what she had dreamed of. It was what she managed to get. And for now, it was all she had. The company was the kind of place that smiled at you during the interview and forgot your name the following week. Livia quickly learned the unwritten rules. Arrive early, leave late, don't question, don't complain. Supervisors changed moods without warning. Overtime became a silent obligation, and any mistake, no matter how small, was turned into a veiled threat of dismissal. She swallowed it all. She needed that paycheck. It was during the internal audit that things began to change. Dozens of employees were let go within a single week. Livia survived, but the price was working alone, in the middle of the night, sorting through files nobody wanted to touch. It was during those silent nights that she began to notice something about that company wasn't quite what it seemed. The files were old, some dated back decades. Livia was sorting through stacks of documents without paying much attention when a photograph slipped and fell to the floor. It was an old corporate image with a date stamped on the back, 1987. The man at the center of the photo wore a dark suit and stared directly into the camera. She recognized the face immediately. It was Enrique Valente, exactly as he appeared today. Same posture, same gaze, same face, not a single extra wrinkle. Livia turned the photo over slowly. Then she looked for another, and another. Different decades, different companies, different names, but the same man, always unchanged, always at the center. Her heart raced. She carefully put everything back in place, turned off the light, and pretended she had seen nothing. In the days that followed, Livia returned to the files with different eyes. She began discreetly photographing documents with her phone, cross-referencing records from the different companies Enrique had run over the decades. The pattern repeated with unsettling precision. Each company lasted between 15 and 20 years, then quietly shut down. A new one would emerge shortly after, with a different name but an identical structure. And there were always employees who disappeared from the records without explanation. Not formally dismissed, simply removed. Livia matched names, dates, and addresses. Some employees she managed to trace on social media. Others simply no longer existed anywhere. No active accounts, no mentions, no digital footprint. She closed the laptop, looked down the empty hallway, and felt for the first time that investigating any further might be far more dangerous than pretending she never knew. It was on a Tuesday that Enrique Valente called her in for the second time. This time, Livia knew it was no coincidence. She entered the office with steady steps, determined not to show any nerves. The room was wide, dark, and strangely cold for that time of year. Enrique stood with his back to the door, gazing out the window at the city below. When he turned around, he smiled. It was a polite, calculated smile that never reached his eyes. "You are curious, Livia." It was not a question. She did not answer right away. She waited. She had learned early on that silence reveals more than words. Curious people, he continued, usually have two choices here. They move forward, or they disappear. Livia looked directly at him and answered in a calm voice, "Then tell me how one moves forward." Enrique did not answer right away. He walked slowly to his desk, opened a drawer, and placed an envelope on the surface with Livia's name written by hand. Inside was an amount she had never seen on a paycheck, 3 times her current salary, deposited immediately. The condition was simple. She would continue working normally. No questions, no investigations, no conversations about what she had found in the files. Livia looked at the envelope. She thought about her mother, about the medications running out, about the overdue rent. "And if I refuse?" she asked. Enrique watched her for a long moment before responding. "Nobody refuses, Livia. Not when they truly need to." She left the office with the envelope in her hand and a heavy heart, not because she was afraid of him, but because she knew he was right. And that was the most frightening part of all. Livia accepted the money, and she hated admitting that even to herself. Her mother's medications were renewed. The rent was paid off. Her younger brother received enough money to go back to school, even though she knew he probably wouldn't. For 2 weeks, she tried to convince herself she had made the right decision, but the files never left her mind. She began watching her co-workers with different eyes. She noticed that employees who received sudden promotions always had something in common. They were all in desperate financial situations. Debts, sick family members, unemployed relatives, vulnerability. That was what Enrique looked for. He didn't hire the most qualified professionals. He hired the most desperate people, those who couldn't afford to ask questions, those who would disappear without anyone searching too hard. Livia realized with a cold clarity that she fit that profile perfectly. Livia decided she needed a way out, but she had to be careful. She began documenting everything in silence, not to expose Enrique publicly. She already knew that nobody would believe an administrative assistant without concrete evidence against a respected millionaire. But to have something in hand, a protection, a bargaining chip. For weeks, she organized digital copies of documents, old photographs, and records from previous companies. She kept everything on an external device hidden outside her apartment. At the same time, she continued working normally. She smiled at supervisors, met deadlines, raised no suspicions. On the inside, she was building a dossier. The hardest part was not the fear of being discovered. It was living daily with the sensation of being watched. Enrique rarely appeared, but when he did, his eyes found hers with a precision that suggested he knew exactly what she was doing. And yet, he did nothing. That frightened her more than any direct threat ever could. The final conversation happened on a Thursday night. Enrique called her to the office without warning. This time, 2 chairs were positioned face to face in the center of the room. He gestured for her to sit, as if it were an ordinary business meeting. "You have gathered enough material," he said calmly. "I know what you have, and you know what I am." Livia did not deny it. There was no longer any reason to pretend. "What do you want?" she asked directly. "The same thing I have always wanted," he replied, "for things to remain exactly as they are." He slid a second envelope across the desk. This time, the amount was enough to cover her mother's full treatment for 2 years, with a considerable reserve left over. "You leave. You start over somewhere else, and we both move on." Livia looked at the envelope. Then she looked at him. And for the first time since everything began, she felt like she was the one in control. Livia took the envelope, not with haste, not with relief, with the calm of someone who had made her decision long before that moment. She stood up, adjusted her bag on her shoulder, and walked to the door. Before leaving, she stopped and turned to face Enrique one last time. "You choose desperate people because you believe desperation buys silence," she said. "But this time, the silence is my choice, not yours." Enrique did not respond. He simply watched her with that same calculated expression as always. Livia left without looking back. In the weeks that followed, she formally resigned, transferred the digital files to a safe location, and began planning her move to another city. She told no one. Not her mother, not her brother. Some stories don't need to be told to be real. She had entered that company as a young woman with no choices. She left as someone who had learned to create her own. 3 months later, Livia was in another city. The apartment was small, but it was hers. Her mother had moved with her, and for the first time in years, the medications were secured well in advance. Her brother was still a concern, but she had learned that she could not carry the weight of choices that were not hers to make. The new job was simple. No glamour, no mysterious millionaires, no empty hallways in the middle of the night, and that was exactly what she needed. Sometimes, before falling asleep, she thought about Enrique. Not with fear, not with anger, with a cold clarity that only time can bring. He was still there. The company was still operating. Other vulnerable employees were still being hired. The system moved forward, invisible and silent as it always had been. Livia had not saved anyone. She had not exposed anything. She had simply survived with intelligence in a world that rarely rewards those without power. And perhaps, she thought, that was enough. Livia's true story is not about monsters. It is about a system that turns vulnerability into a resource, and about a woman who refused to be consumed by it. Now, before we wrap up, I want to hear from you. What city are you watching this story from today? Tell us in the comments. You'll be surprised how many people from so many different places are right here with you. What did you think of Livia's choice? Would you have done things differently? If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to the channel. It's free. It only takes a second, and it makes an enormous difference in helping us continue bringing stories like this one. Real stories about real people who choose to keep moving forward even when everything seems impossible. Until the next story, take care of yourself.